I agreed to date the most rejected woman to avoid spending Christmas alone. But, at 34, I carried myself with a charisma and charm that often drew people in. Though beneath my carefree smile was a complex past that made me cautious about long-term commitments. My tousled hair and sharp green eyes might have painted a confident exterior, but the holidays had always been a struggle. Growing up, Christmas in my household was riddled with tension, fueled by my parents' strained marriage. The season, for me, became synonymous with unresolved conflict, leading me to avoid family gatherings altogether. Instead, I sought solace in the buzz of bars or with friends, chasing fleeting distractions from the emptiness I felt. For years, James, my best friend and co-worker, had been my partner in escaping the emotional weight of the holidays. Together, we laughed off expectations and embraced a single life, free from the burden of commitments. But this year felt different. The office was alive with excitement as Christmas approached, colleagues exchanging stories about family dinners, romantic getaways, and festive celebrations. Meanwhile, I braced myself for yet another Christmas night out with James. 2 days before Christmas Eve, I approached him after another long day at work, my usual excitement intact. "Hey, James, I found the perfect spot for Christmas night. There's this new bar downtown with live music, packed with people, and a great vibe. It'll be awesome." James hesitated, his smile softer than usual. There was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "That sounds fun, but you remember Julia. Things are getting serious with her. She invited me to spend Christmas with her family this year." My eyes widened in surprise. James had always been the last person I'd imagined settling down, and hearing this felt like a shift in the universe. "Wait, are you serious? Spending Christmas with her family?" I teased, though disbelief laced my tone. "What? Are you planning to propose or something?" James laughed awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "No, man, it's not like that. But, you know, sometimes life just changes. Maybe one day you'll get it." I tried to shrug it off, pretending it didn't bother me, but his words lingered. After we parted ways, I tried to make other plans, reaching out to friends and stopping by their desks. The responses were all the same. Plans were already made: family dinners, vacations, or romantic evenings. For the first time, I felt the weight of my solitude. On the final workday before Christmas, the office was glowing with holiday cheer. Strings of twinkling lights hung from the windows, and the sweet scent of cookies filled the air. Laughter echoed as colleagues exchanged gifts and hugs. But I sat at my desk, staring blankly at my computer. The truth was, there was no reason for me to leave, no party to attend, no one waiting for me at home. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. It was my mother. "Hi, Mom," I answered, trying to inject some cheer into my voice. "Hi, darling. I just wanted to remind you about the family dinner on Christmas Eve. We'd love to have you here. It's been so long since we've all been together." I closed my eyes, guilt tugging at me. As much as I wanted to see her, the thought of sitting through another strained family gathering made me uneasy. "Thanks, Mom, but I've already made plans," I lied, forcing a lightness into my tone. "It's going to be exciting." There was a pause before she responded softly, "All right, dear. Just know the door is always open." After we hung up, I looked around the office. It was almost empty now, save for one person, Alice. Alice was a quiet presence, often overlooked in the office hustle, with her brown hair pulled back in a simple bun and her thin glasses. She was the kind of person most wouldn't notice. People labeled her the cat lady, a cruel stereotype reflecting her solitary and reserved nature. But as I glanced over, something shifted in me. Alice wasn't part of the festive buzz. Like me, she was alone, an unspoken connection binding us. While others filled their lives with noise and people, we seemed to exist in the same quiet, lonely space. I walked over to her desk, offering a smile. "Hey, Alice, everything good?" She looked up, startled, but smiled shyly. "Yeah, just finishing up. You?" "Same," I replied, rubbing the back of my neck. "Not much going on this year." "Huh." She nodded softly. "Yeah, it's just one of those times." For a moment, we stood there, the silence between us saying more than words ever could. And though we didn't say it aloud, we both knew we'd be spending the holidays together in our own quiet way. Sometimes, that was all anyone truly needed. Like many of my colleagues, I had never bothered to learn much about Alice. She was always immersed in spreadsheets and reports, seemingly oblivious to the subtle whispers around her. She rarely joined after-work drinks or group lunches, an exclusion she seemed to accept without visible discomfort. Her introspective nature was often misinterpreted as aloofness or antisocial behavior. One evening, as Alice passed my desk, she paused, holding a stack of papers in one hand. Her smile was soft but genuine, and her calm voice broke the silence of the nearly empty office. I didn't realize anyone was still around. You're really dedicated, just don't work too hard, or you might be late for Christmas dinner. I looked up from my screen, surprised by her words. I gave a nervous laugh and shook my head. Well, actually, I don't have any plans for the holiday. Alice raised an eyebrow, her surprise evident. She hesitated, as though considering whether to continue. Well, I don't have anyone to spend Christmas with either. I'm planning to make dinner at home, just something simple. If you'd like, you're welcome to join me, at least for a meal. I was taken aback. The idea of spending Christmas with the office cat lady wasn't exactly how I envisioned the holiday, but there was something in Alice's calm, sincere gaze that stopped me from immediately declining. There was no pity in her offer, just genuine kindness, a quiet attempt to provide some companionship to someone as isolated as she was. Well, why not? It might be nice to eat something other than takeout, I responded, still unsure but smiling at her. Alice nodded, visibly pleased with my answer. A few hours later, I arrived at Alice's apartment. To my surprise, I was greeted not by a sea of cats, but by an energetic golden retriever. This is Max. Alice introduced the dog with affection. He loves visitors. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. She had a dog instead of cats. The apartment was cozy, filled with the warm aroma of cinnamon and pine. As I looked around, my gaze was drawn to a beautiful painting on the living room wall, a serene landscape of mountains and a lake. I painted it a few years ago, Alice said, noticing my admiration. I'm glad you like it. It's really beautiful, I said, taking in the details. Alice invited me to help myself at the small bar area while she finished preparing dinner. I selected a glass of red wine and sank into the soft couch, feeling surprisingly at ease. I'm not sure about the tradition in your family, but do you wait until midnight to eat? Alice called from the kitchen. My family didn't really have any traditions, I replied, swirling my wine. We can eat now if that's fine with you. We sat down to eat at a table that Alice had set with care. There was roasted turkey, potatoes, vegetables, and a pie that smelled mouth-watering. I was impressed by how thoughtfully everything was prepared. As we ate, the comforting aromas of the meal filled the air. Alice looked at me with a curious but kind expression. Can I ask you something? She said softly. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. But why are you spending Christmas alone? I hesitated, my fingers tracing the rim of my wine glass. The atmosphere in the room was warm, almost magical, and there was something about Alice's welcoming presence that made me lower my defenses. My family's complicated, I began, my voice quiet. I took a breath, as if gathering the courage to revisit memories I had long buried. When I was a kid, my parents lived in a constant cycle of arguments and reconciliations. Every holiday, especially Christmas, ended up being a battlefield. The smallest thing, like the turkey being dry or someone forgetting a gift, could turn into a huge fight. Christmas was never the peaceful time people talk about. I paused, my eyes distant, and Alice stayed silent, encouraging me to go on. But there was one Christmas, I continued, my voice slightly cracking, when everything felt different. My parents were calm, almost kind to each other. I remember my older sister even joked it was a Christmas miracle. They laughed, they talked without arguing, and for the first time in years, it seemed like we were a normal family. I lowered my gaze, gripping the glass tighter as I recalled that night, when we all gathered in the living room. I thought it was to announce something special, something that would justify the strange quietness. But what they said instead shook me to my core. They told us they were going to separate. A bitter laugh escaped me, almost as if I were trying to ease the weight of the memory. It was a shock. I spent the night staring at the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree, trying to understand how something that seemed so peaceful, so perfect, had been nothing more than a farewell in disguise. After years apart, my parents eventually got back together. They seemed to find a balance, but the feeling of instability never left. Since then, they've always invited me to spend the holidays with them, but deep down, I think I'm afraid. What if, in the middle of an apparently calm dinner, they start arguing again? Or worse, what if at the end of the night, they announce once again that they're separating? It's like a part of me is always waiting for the worst to happen. That's why I keep my distance. It's easier to deal with the loneliness I already know than to risk opening up to something that might hurt me again. Maybe it's cowardice, but that's how I have been dealing with it. I avoid getting close to anyone, so I don't risk losing everything again. Alice listened intently, her gaze soft with sympathy. When I finished, there was a brief silence before I felt the need to ask, almost shyly, "And you, Alice, why didn't you have any plans for Christmas?" Alice gently set down her fork as if the act itself helped her gather the words she needed. Her brown eyes softened, but there was a shadow there, a mark of old pain. "Well," she began, her voice calm but laced with sorrow, "my parents passed away a few years ago. They were wonderful people, but they left too soon. And to be honest, my marriage didn't survive the death of our 3-year-old son." Her words hit me like a wave. I was so caught off guard that I nearly choked on my food. The sound of my fork clattering against the plate echoed in the quiet room. My eyes widened as I tried to reconcile her quiet, reserved nature with the immense grief she carried. "I'm sorry, Alice," I stammered, my voice thick with regret and embarrassment for never truly noticing her pain. Alice smiled gently, a smile that spoke of both acceptance and strength. "It's okay. Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "It's been a few years now, and while I still miss him every day, the most intense pain has passed." She paused for a moment, her gaze briefly drifting to a painting on the wall. "Unfortunately, grief was something my ex-husband and I couldn't face together. We lost our son, and over time, we lost each other, too." Shifted uncomfortably in my chair. Her pain was so deep, so real, that my own fears and traumas, ones I'd always considered monumental, seemed insignificant in comparison. "You are very strong, Alice," I murmured, feeling disarmed by her calmness and honesty. Alice looked up at me and shrugged slightly. Her smile softened even more. "Strength isn't always a choice. Sometimes, it's just the only option we have." She paused before continuing. "Can I give you some advice?" she asked gently. "Don't let the fear of the future steal the moments you can enjoy in the present. Living stuck in the past robs us of precious time." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For the rest of the dinner, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, and we discovered we had much more in common than I ever imagined. Everything from music to favorite movies. I was surprised to realize how quickly time passed in her company. Around midnight, I leaned back in my chair, feeling surprisingly content. "Alice, I had a great time tonight. I never imagined you had so many funny stories," I remarked. Alice laughed, and I found myself grinning. Who would have thought the cat lady was actually the lead singer in a rock band in college, right? I blushed, embarrassed that she knew about the nickname, but Alice didn't seem offended. Instead, she appeared amused by the situation. Suddenly, an idea came to me. "Alice, you were right about not wasting time on past fears," I said, almost excitedly. "Would you come with me to my parents' house? They don't live far from here. Maybe we can still catch dessert," Alice suggested, glad to help me reconnect with my family. Arriving at my parents' house, we were greeted with surprise and joy. My mother, a kind woman with silver hair and a warm smile, couldn't hide her excitement at seeing me. "What a wonderful surprise," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. My father, a tall man with a serious demeanor but a gentle gaze, smiled warmly upon seeing me. "I'm glad you came, son," he said. I introduced Alice as a friend, and she was warmly welcomed by the family. The living room was adorned with festive Christmas lights, and the scent of cinnamon and hot chocolate filled the air. My family was visibly happy with my unexpected arrival. My siblings, already married with children, played with their kids around the Christmas tree. I felt a pang of regret for having missed so many moments like this in recent years. As we enjoyed the dessert, a delicious pecan pie, I watched the scene unfold. My mother laughed at a joke from my father. My nieces and nephews ran joyfully through the room, and Alice chatted animatedly with my sister-in-law. I realized that the fear that had kept me away for so long was unfounded. Here, before me, was the family I had avoided 4 years, united and happy. In the months that followed, Alice and I grew closer. I discovered in her a kind and understanding friend, someone who made me laugh and helped me break out of my shell. Alice, in turn, found in me someone who encouraged her to let go and embrace life. As our connection deepened, I, who had always avoided serious relationships, found myself completely in love with the woman who had once been labeled the quiet one at the office. The following Christmas, Alice and I celebrated together at my family's house. The atmosphere was festive, filled with laughter and lively conversations. I watched Alice interacting with my family, feeling a happiness I hadn't experienced in a long time. In a moment of calm, I asked for everyone's attention, my heart racing. I knelt before Alice, pulling a small box from my pocket. "Alice," I began, my voice full of emotion, "you taught me that the past doesn't have to define our future. With you, I've learned to value each moment and to open my heart again. You make me want to be a better person every day. Will you marry me?" With tears in her eyes, Alice gave an emotional yes. My family erupted into applause, moved by the moment. As I embraced Alice, I whispered, "Christmas is no longer a date to fear because of the past, but one full of hope for the future." We kissed, sealing not only our love, but also the promise of a future filled with joy. I finally understood that the true Christmas spirit wasn't in the decorations or the gifts, but in the ability to forgive, to start anew, and to love. That night, as everyone celebrated the engagement and the unity of the family, I looked at Alice with deep gratitude. She was not only the woman I loved, but also the person who had helped me rediscover the value of family and the magic of Christmas. What began as an unexpected meeting between two lonely hearts had turned into a beautiful story of love, healing, and new beginnings. Alice and I proved that sometimes the best Christmas gifts don't come wrapped, but in the form of second chances and new starts.